Hello, everybody. Kara, great
Hello.
to be here tonight.
It really is. This is our second lecture for the fall season. Pretty excited about it. Um,
Absolutely.
yeah, and just a reminder that our final lecture is going to be on November 15th, where we'll have Mina Sentenkaya Rundell will do a lecture on data science. So really excited to wrap up our fall season with that one.
And I understand that we have a number of our outreach programs that are about to open the application season for the 2024.
Yes, really excited about some funding opportunities coming out of the programs department at MAA. For those who are interested in funding an REU, we will have our NRUP program opening up for funding opportunities, and then our outreach programs as well. So if you are a faculty member working with a local middle school or high school on a math education program, be sure to check us out. In about 2 weeks, we'll be opening up some applications for funding for those programs. So I'm really excited about that.
That's great. Yeah, I think I encourage everybody out there who's got an interest in working with students and reaching out and engaging new students to look at those programs. Great opportunities there.
Absolutely. We'll try to get a link in the chat for folks if you just want to learn more and be in the know when we do actually launch those applications. So yeah, Michael, how about we get started? Let's kick it off.
I'm ready.
Yeah.
Thank you. Hello, Dr. Cotwright-Williams. I was about to say Carla, but I'll be a little more formal in this setting. It's really great to have you with us tonight. I'm really looking forward to hearing this talk. It's one of the things we think about on a policy level all the time is the relevance of mathematics to public policy and the lives that we live. So I'm very excited to hear your thoughts on that tonight. So welcome. And I will just jump right in. Carla Cotwright-Williams is a PhD mathematician who has a wide variety of diverse experiences across the federal government, academia, and industry. She currently works as a data scientist at the Department of Defense. Dr. Cotwright-Williams received her PhD degree at the University of Mississippi. Had to throw that in since we just learned that I also have a undergraduate degree from Ole Miss, although admittedly that was about the year you were born when I got that degree. But after receiving her PhD, she served as a faculty member in mathematics at Wake Forest University, Hampton University, and Norfolk State University. Through this time, however, she became more interested in shifting her career to public service. She worked on collaborative research projects with NASA and the U.S. Navy, and along the way earned a graduate certificate in public policy analysis at Old Dominion University. In 2012-13, Dr. Cotwright-Williams served as the AMS Congressional Fellow under the AAAS Science and Technology Fellowship Program. Subsequently, she worked on a variety of data issues at the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services and at the Social Security Administration before returning to the Department of Defense in 2018. Dr. Cotwright-Williams' work gives her insight into the ways in which mathematics is viewed within and can contribute to effective public policy across a variety of sectors, as well as how those policies affect our lives. I'm delighted to welcome Dr. Cotwright-Williams tonight to share her views on mathematics and policy.
Thank you very much. I am so pleased to be here with everyone this evening. Thank you for the invitation to the organizers, and let's get to it. So the views and opinions expressed during this presentation and even during the Q&A are my own and don't necessarily reflect the views or the positions of any entities that I'm affiliated with. So I just want to put that out there just so we can set the stage. And while I'm not necessarily speaking regarding original research of my own. Much of what the content that we'll see here is publicly available, and I provided references and resources to, for the listening audience to refer to for future reference. So, we're mathematicians. We like a good definition. Let's start off with, what is policymaking? What is policy? So the process, and I like this definition. It is from Wikipedia, but there are some valuable things out there we can learn from the public domain. But it's the process of making and enforcing decisions within an organization or society. And, we take it for granted, I think, that we have guiding principles and rules and laws around us to keep us safe, keep us informed, and keep us, we contribute, taxes and dollars to a general, as in the U.S., to support the country. And so there are rules that we follow and laws that we follow that just help make things just run a little smoother for us all. And sorry, this is a little smaller than I expected it to be, but there is a constitution that we follow here in the United States, and it for the legislative branch that we look to, there's some particular directions that we have right there, that all legislative powers herein granted shall be vested in a Congress of the United States, which shall consist of a Senate and a House of Representatives. And so, how are laws made? Well, laws begin with ideas. And I think that's really important for us to keep in mind as we are throughout this discussion, because, we think, well, it takes this big super duper, mechanism to start the wheels turning to establish a law. And yes, that's true. But it often just simply starts with an idea, a situation or circumstance where it says, we need to make a generalized principle that everyone should follow based on this situation. And so I think you'll see some interesting examples that we'll see this evening that reflect that. And so not to go too deep into the legislative process for the United States Congress, but this picture is not super duper great, but I thought it was comprehensive enough that, if you wanted to take a deeper dive, you could in the future. But, essentially there are steps that an idea and a subsequent bill will go through in order to become law. And so these are those stages, those steps that we, I say people who monitor this type of process and members of Congress and their staff, ensure that this process is adhered to and followed to the T. And so I'd like to share it because I don't think a lot of times it's easy to really get focused in on and go take that deep dive into your research area or into your teaching space and not really think about, how are these bigger issues being resolved? And so I think this is a nice refresher. I think many people take a civics class in high school, maybe even middle school. Some may even take a course in college, a social science course or something in college. And so this is a nice refresher here. And so, there are things that we see every day, and we realize in the news and social media that, there's a process. And so this, again, is a reflection of what that process is to be. This next one is not necessarily a legislative process. Clearly it's not, but I like this diagram of just highlighting how in general policy is made. You have an agenda, you have an idea, there's a circumstance that needs to be codified, a decision that needs to be codified, and it might go through this process. So you might have an agenda that's set, you have at some point, you will evaluate or establish that thing, that policy. Then there's an adoption of the policy, an implementation, and at some point you want to evaluate it. And perhaps after that evaluation, there will need to be an update to a policy, for example. And so it would go through this cycle, this process. And I thought it was a good visual, but I also thought it was a simple explanation of the policymaking process in general. So examples of policymaking in the last century, I immediately thought of cigarettes and seatbelts. Very common things in our society that people utilize every day, and for the most part, in my opinion, there is widespread public acceptance of the laws. For smoking bans, maybe not everyone agrees with that, but for those in public spaces, people agree with that. They will go to the designated spots. We see that at airports, for example, and the wearing of seatbelts, right? So we do it. We do it because we are told to. There are rules, and if we don't follow those rules, those laws, then perhaps we might get a ticket, for example. But for the most part, I think people in our communities and in the public, agree and accept these types of things. Well, where does it come from? Well, for example, at some point in our history, in this case, 1968, there was research, and this graph, I'll discuss both parts of this because the graph doesn't necessarily reflect the specific start of the research, but the federal government began to require lap and shoulder seatbelts for the front and outward seats for all new cars sold in the U.S. Well, before then, I've seen pictures, I'm sure you've all seen pictures where, it wasn't really a secure environment in a car, right? You would just be as safe as possible and hope that nothing really goes wrong. But we can see with this graph here, and while it's not sophisticated mathematics, there's not complex formulas here, when it comes to policymaking, policymakers will often rely on such visuals to help to make their case. So they're not always looking at the algorithm or looking at the models that are being created to make their decisions. So a graph like this would really clearly bring home that if you see the blue, the belt use percentage, and then the green is the percent of unrestrained passengers on a vehicle, and those are the fatalities, that we see that as the use of seatbelts goes up, that those fatalities does go down. And so, again, it's not sophisticated math. Maybe there's some additional modeling that could be done here, but just simple counts, simple summary statistics here, highlight that there's value to wearing a seatbelt. Okay. And I use this as a really nice starter example to just say that, policymakers have to make lots of decisions. Having a clear and concise presentation of the facts would make their work a lot easier. And the facts meaning the data in this case. Okay. Similarly, there was a Surgeon General's report on the adverse health effects of smoking back in 1964. And this particular one had a subsequent summary, a supplement to that report. And if you can see here that for those who regularly smoked and those who regularly smoke rather, had either coronary heart disease or had strokes, that there were death rates and mortality rates. And that's if they were smokers, those numbers were increased. And again, it was motivation enough to establish laws. In this case, I refer to them as policies, but laws regarding the labeling of cigarette packages, for example, and banning cigarette advertisement on TV and radio. Again, these aren't necessarily heavy-hitting, mathematically complex findings, but the impact of them was widespread. We all are still living under similar laws. I mean, they're still in effect, but we see going forward that there are similar types of discussions and potential bans, future bans on other types of similar type products. So this is where policymakers are not necessarily, making decisions about people, how they live their lives, but in this case for cigarettes, that was concerned about secondhand smoke, for example, that type of thing. So, it's there, right? And we are used to going, we live our lives around it. And so I think simple as it is, it makes a lot of sense. And so even though it's just a simple, summary. Okay, there we go. Oh, we went too far. So another particular policy area, in this case, I feel like AI is probably one of the top policy issues of this century because of the widespread use and impact of AI for our society. I wanted to talk about this in terms of some of the math that we find that underlies the underlying foundation for artificial intelligence and some of the policy implications. So, AI, some of you all, if you are familiar with various types of AI, you have machine learning, natural language processing, vision and speech, and robotics even. And so these are, I thought this was a nice visual again of just, summarizing where AI is and what AI is, what is available currently in the technology. I know that we often will look at movies and TV shows, and it seems like AI is very sophisticated and the machines are going to take over, but not quite yet. The technology is growing and it's expanding, but it's not quite there yet. But there's still a need to govern the use of AI and the policies surrounding the use and availability of AI. And so that's what we're going to get into this discussion today. Another visual I thought was very useful. Machine learning is a primary AI function that capability is very prevalent today. And we see there the NLP, natural language processing, is related. Robotics, many robots now that are programmed are simply just rules-based. They're not necessarily following, they're not necessarily thinking on their own. They're just following the rules that have been programmed with them. Autonomous vehicles is huge. We're seeing lots of things in the news about them. And not to point any particular fingers or any particular directions, but it's a neat technology, right? Potentially makes lives easier, but there are concerns, right? Everyone's not going to have a vehicle that drives itself. So we have to think about how to govern and manage those autonomous vehicles that are on the road with others that are not autonomous, and also vision. And so there are really interesting examples of AI that are around us every day. Speaking of autonomous vehicles, this was a couple of years ago, but 60 Minutes had a story on the use of automated trucking, which supports the supply chain and that type of thing. Well, it's already a tough go when we're driving around on the highways with 16-wheelers. So to have them that are automated, well, we need to have some additional rules, right? We need to know what the playing rules are going to be for us to for these to operate in these spaces, but also that they would operate safely. And so I thought that was an interesting story. The federal government is actually tracking the use of and testing of autonomous vehicles. This is an example of, again, summary statistics, but it helps to inform policymakers, seeing these summarized numbers. And granted, probably most of the folks listening in today might do math that, is that complex foundation for AI. The policymakers just aren't going to need that quickly. They need it. They need something that's quick and digestible. And so while it's valuable into building the technology and even testing and evaluating the technology, when we have to share that information to policymakers, legislators, we have to put it in a way that is going to be most useful to them and their staff. Along the same lines of autonomous vehicles, even non-self-driving vehicles, you have electronic systems in those vehicles, communication networks, control algorithms and software and such, and even underlying data. Automotive cybersecurity, that's probably something most people haven't really thought about, because we don't necessarily have to always. That's why other people are thinking about these things, so that not everyone has to. But you have these vehicles, we want them to operate safely, but we also might need to keep track that the data is safe. That if I'm going to a big box store, that my paths are if I wanted to keep them private, maybe I'm concerned about that. But we also, I think the most important is safety, right? If someone was to take over, and we've probably seen this in movies, right? Was to electronically take over my car, and I'm pretty sure there's a movie I could call out. I won't, but you want it to be safe, right? So how do we protect these systems? And so again, there's plenty of mathematical algorithms to detect such kind of anomalies in these systems. And again, there's policy outcomes. Policy outcomes would be: is the data safe? How do we maintain safe data if it's going to be changing so frequently? How do we maintain the protection of these vehicles if they're on the road and someone is able to break into the system and drive the car and drive it off the road or something, as we've seen in movies? I don't want to say that in real life, but we want to make sure that there's ways to protect, and to protect the society, the public rather, who are potentially driving these vehicles. And so I just thought this is an interesting example to include that there are significant policy implications, even though most of us probably will be focused on the technology and building technology, that technology has to be used at some point. Another example of a current issue, a current technology that is experienced very widespread use in recent months would be generative AI. I found this really nice visual from the Government Accountability Office. And if you see here at the top, this is just several steps that are demonstrated here, where a user is seeking to have the algorithm, the tool, to draw an orange cat in an abstract style. And so the system analyzes this prompt, this request, and identifies features of a cat and of abstract art. And so you can see that there in that second row. And the third row, well, it comes back with some generated images. I thought is pretty funny because people like cats, of course, and maybe not abstract art, but I thought these are pretty good images that were generated. And so it comes back, says, here's your headshot is in this last box. It says draw orange cat headshot in an abstract style. Well, and then that final image there. So that generative AI, which I'm not going to mention any particular ones, but I think plenty of us are very familiar with the technology, even though it's probably not referred to as generative AI to you immediately. But such tools are a lot of fun, but they've been very useful. In fact, I read today an article about using such technology to write proofs. And I know plenty of discussion has been around using such technology for homework and writing essays, right? So those kinds of questions come up. Well, what are the policy implications of using such technology in that way. Well, there are some challenges, and I just wanted to highlight these. These were highlighted in this particular GAO report. But trust and oversight concerns. Well, suppose a person is using this particular tool, this particular technology, and the computer's just doing what it's been asked to do based on the algorithms that it has been programmed with. Well, if it's harmful, then it could potentially increase the speed of scale for the harm that was potentially coming from that instruction. And so those are concerns that while individuals may not necessarily think about those concerns, policymakers have to think about that big picture. Potentially false information. Again, a computer is only going to do what it's been told to do based on the algorithms that it's following. False information. We see this just in everyday life where, a student has a proof and they maybe mix up some things and it's not quite right. Similarly, when a computer might follow suit and provide an output that is just false, just plain and simple false. It's, the request information that's just not in the training data. In this case, it suggests, but sometimes, unfortunately, the user may not know that it's. I think we've seen examples of that in our everyday lives and social media and that type of thing. Economic issues. We all, especially in the math community, will have publications, for example, as an output of our scholarly work. Well, if a person is using a particular tool, generative AI tool, and they run the app and they get this output that captures a good portion of a paper that you just published, who does it belong to? Does it belong to them? Does it belong to you still? That's a policy issue. And so actually there's a lot of attention being given to that in different groups. And I'll talk a little bit more about what, for example, the AMS is doing to look closer at issues like that. And privacy risk, for example, reducing that these particular technical features of such AI might reduce the privacy of for users, and especially we would be concerned about minors. And again, that's an example of policy making meeting day-to-day lives. Well, maybe if I don't have a child, I don't need to worry about the impacts on the minor. But as a society, we like to think about all the members of the society that we should at least consider. And so policymakers have to do that. Facial recognition is another technology that has significant policy implications. In a 2020 Forbes magazine article, they highlight some of the conclusions from its technical tech council. Racial bias and reliance on probability are serious challenges. Sometimes the training data available does not really reflect a good sample of faces or society. So it's going to be biased, right? If it has more, faces of others, and rather than a diverse set of faces, for example. And as the second bullet there, it's only as good as the data that's trained with, and that makes a lot of sense because you could easily get bias there. And that's why I think while, again, we all have our research areas, I think it's important that we consider some of these potential outcomes that while it's not directly impacting you per se, we need to really consider and think about the outcomes of the work that we might do and how it might potentially impact the community and society around us. Okay. Facial recognition tools and can also recognize objects. And I thought that was an interesting thing that maybe we hadn't thought about. The technology is still very young. And again, they found that it could pose serious privacy concerns. And again, we're using these technologies probably every day. Probably you've used facial recognition to open your phone, or if you were getting on an airplane and traveling, you might have used this type of technology to go through security, for example, security screening. So it's just, I think it's just neat to kind of just see how the mathematical, foundations of the technology, which that fine tuning of the data, and then the title I kind of implied math and data. So just keeping in mind that all of those parts really do indeed have widespread policy implications. So when we talk about the governance of AI, the policies around AI, just a few spaces that we have to consider are data, the storage of data, the storage of the outcomes, the output of this AI, the algorithms and the models. And so these are things that policymakers, not just policymakers, but even policymakers in industry and in government are thinking about how to manage artificial intelligence, in the sense that we haven't had to do it as much. We have the tools now. There's greater computing power, greater amounts of data available. And so there just has to be governing rules around these. This is another slide I found, a nice visual explanation of the governance of AI, again from GAO. And GAO just happened to have, it's a nice visual. So that's why I chose to use them in this couple of examples. But again, it kind of highlights what we've already talked about thus far in terms of managing data and the security and safety and the potentially regulatory approaches there. That there are indeed policy areas that need to be considered. And again, while as a researcher, I know some of the research I have done in the past did not necessarily seem like it had a direct impact, but thinking about the big picture and how, while I may have this paper down at this particular level, it could potentially be utilized as support for establishing policies on a variety of matters. I wanted to share this particular slide here just to highlight for mathematicians and other scientists of how useful it is to have a strong analytical thinking background and an understanding of complex mathematical concepts to help aid in the need for explainable artificial intelligence. This technology is very complex. It can become really a series of just algorithms that are coded into a system, to create a tool and technology where the users probably don't understand. And depending on how the technology can grow and somewhat rejuvenate itself, do we really understand what's going on, right? We have neural nets, that type of thing. Do we really understand? Black box is often used as a phrase to define those instances where we don't quite understand, but we can't quite explain it, how it actually works. And white box, it just is the opposite, and it's usually something where it's more explainable. But this is a topic that, if we're going to make a policy on it, well, that's great. But do we understand why it's needed? Well, having a better understanding of the technology and being able to explain it to a level that will help inform decision makers is an important opportunity for mathematicians and other scientists as well. So again, yeah, I've kind of alluded to this the entire time. Is it's really easy to kind of just focus on your research area, focus on your specialty area. And I include this question this way because I wanted people to just kind of think about maybe, yeah, I only want to be concerned with my area of research, but I need to think about, well, are there potential societal outcomes? Are there potential science outcomes that are above and beyond just the mathematics and the research that I am producing? And so I wanted to share some resources that are available to just become more connected to the science policy discussion. And so this is just a snapshot of the AMS government relations page. And I just wanted to be able to point people to this page because it's a great resource. Provides some information about, in particular, legislative priorities, elevating mathematics in Congress. There were at least one PhD mathematician in Congress. He's since retired, but most members of Congress, for example, aren't PhDs, or they may not be mathematicians. And if we want to have mathematics be at least higher in their awareness, then entities like the Government Relations Office and even individuals like yourselves have the ability to connect directly with Congress. And so the Government Relations Office provides resources to help inform that. There are often Hill visits that are conducted and made available even to members. I'm sure MAA likely has similar opportunities as well. Many professional societies do. But I have found that this is a really great resource if you're not really aware of how math and science are really directly related to, in particular, our Congress and the legislative process of the United States. This is a great way to learn about that. A particular thing that I wanted to highlight, and you heard this during the introduction, is the Congressional Fellowship. And I wanted to just share that. So this is a program that is for PhD mathematicians. It can be, pure, applied. Math ed is also an opportunity there. But it's in conjunction with the AAAS, the American Association for the Advancement of Science. And this is a hands-on learning experience for one fellow from the AMS, but it's usually in the cohort of about 30 to 40 fellows from other professional societies. But it's a great experience to go and learn the policy-making process firsthand. And so I'll be honest, you're not likely to do mathematics working on the Hill. You will likely have to represent a broader scientific point of view as a staffer, because again, there are not a lot of PhD mathematicians or scientists out there. There are some that, and this program, this type of program has helped to increase those numbers. But the fellowship is a great way to just branch out and build expand your knowledge on the way that policy is being made in Congress. And so you'll spend a year working with a staff member or in an independent office, individual office rather, or with a committee. And so you'll have a chance to work on legislative and policy areas which require scientific and technical input. I'm thinking back to when I was on the Hill. I had my policy portfolio was involving education, but it also involved what was the name of that? Oh gosh, I can't remember. Oh, sorry. But it was not always scientific or technical. Didn't require scientific or technical input. So you have to be flexible in that space. But it's a great learning experience, and I was truly glad to be a part of it. And so you can go to AMS. In fact, just a simple Google search will take you to the page where you can learn more about the Congressional Fellowship and even apply. Okay. So I am currently the chair of the AMS Committee on Science Policy. This committee serves as a forum for dialogue on matters in science policy. For the most part, you know, we are talking about issues that are directly related to the math community, but as we all know and appreciate, math is the foundation for all sciences, in my opinion. And I think you would all agree. And so a lot of the topics that do come up are that will cross the lines of the STEM field, STEM being science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. And so this committee has a current charge we do have a subcommittee there's a focus on AI, but the AMS has a broader advisory group that has been stood up by our current president, and the goal is to develop focus on the issues surrounding AI and the role of mathematics in the development and deployment of artificial intelligence and the impact of our AI on research and mathematics. And as we mentioned earlier, the potential use of AI in publications, education, and research, and the impact of AI on our community. And if you're interested in this type of thing, you can go actually to the webpage and you can provide comment. So that's one current thing with this particular group. Another area that I thought I'd like to share with you all, just because I think there is policy opportunities and implications to research, mathematical research, is the CHIPS for America Act. It is a bipartisan act that provides funding to strengthen and revitalize the U.S. position in semiconductor research, development, and manufacturing. Why is this important? Because it directly relates to AI. But not only that, again, we appreciate that there is underlying mathematical foundations that we all are working on and researching that connect to this broader discussion. So keep that on your radar, that potentially, we're used to tapping into the National Science Foundation, for example, and looking for research opportunities, funding opportunities there. Perhaps, by revisiting and perhaps rewriting your research statements and whatnot, you might find connection to some of these emerging technology funding opportunities. And lastly, I wanted just to highlight, there is a very recent new directorate that was stood up by the National Science Foundation. It's the Directorate of Technology, Innovation, and Partnerships. And TIP's mission is to harness the nation's vast and diverse technical pool to advance critical and emerging technologies and address pressing and societal economic challenges. Again, this is another opportunity. So we're used to looking at the Division of Mathematical Sciences. We have the education division. There's several there that people find very interesting and tap into. But TIP is a new one. I think it's worth looking at as an opportunity to potentially find funding opportunities, but not just that, but to realize and appreciate how the work, the research that, and not just even research, the student development that we are all a part of as in academia, that how it does increase and grow the U.S. economy and the diverse workforce and so on. And so with that, I'm just about out of time, and I will stop here and take questions.
Thank you, Dr. C. Very much appreciate that. Your talk connected some dots for me in ways I'm not sure I'd thought of it before. You started off talking about the seat belts, or you talked about seat belts early in the Well, and in that case, the harm, if you will, death or injury, was kind of easy to define and measure. One example of the use of mathematics in policy that you didn't talk about here, but the math community has gotten involved with, for example, redistricting questions around districting. And there, the ways of defining harm or even deciding what constitutes harm got more complicated. And so I wonder but then you outlined a whole range of things around data and AI that I think we all should be very interested in understanding what kinds of laws might come to be, what kind of policies are already in place that are allowing things to happen that maybe we don't like. But how is there discussions in those areas around how to define and measure harm, I guess, is the question. Because that seems hard. That seems like a hard problem, but one that mathematicians might be particularly well suited to engage in.
So there's a great deal of work in this area. Ethical AI is what it's often referred to, and it's the overarching examination of the use of AI, the use of the data, the potential impact on user groups, the potential impact on society beyond those user groups. So yes, there are people looking at that. A lot of times there are people looking at this who may not necessarily build on a technical mathematical foundation. Maybe they're building on it from another point of view. And so that's why I think it's really useful to have quantitative thinkers in these spaces, and those who are, to a certain extent, as much as possible, have an objective point of view, that they're able to use data, analyze data, and present facts based on data, as opposed to just a whim or a political point of view.
Yes, that's even if we have different ideas about what constitutes harm, how do we measure again, with your seatbelts, it was sort of easy to measure the impact of changing practice that was driven by policy. But how do we, I think coming up with tools that allow us to measure the impact of different policies, even without regard to assigning a good, bad value judgment to them, just what is the outcome?
Yeah, and I think we would all agree that one of the reasons why we all enjoy math is because it does provide us that objectivity, right? That we can, I won't say black and white, that it's just clear, that it's just data, but I mean, there's some objectivity to it that we do take for granted, I think, in these cases. And so interjecting that into this problem set, this broader problem set, is only going to make the solution even better.
Yes.
And there's not just one solution for sure, but at least there's opportunity to find solutions that we can all agree upon, based on the quantitative.
Yes. It would be nice to think that we could all agree on anything these days, but yes, at least to get some sort of broad consensus around these issues. And, I think, the issues you were pointing to around AI and data, that is mathematics, pure and simple. Whether it's in silicon or on a piece of paper.
Absolutely. And it's what I've seen, and there's no knock to the, publicly available trainings that people are taking to get into the space. But there is certainly value to having a formal mathematics training and formal research experience in doing this work. And so having that I won't say deep-seated, because we have our own challenges in the math community that we're growing and working out of. But having at least that training really sets the stage for opportunity and advancement.
Absolutely. Well, I wanted to end with just one question about your experience on the Hill. I believe you ended up working on the committee side of
I
things.
did. I
Right?
did. Mm-hmm.
What committee were you working with?
The Senate Homeland Security and Government Affairs Committee.
Mm-hmm.
I worked with the majority staff at that time.
I'm just curious, can you describe an example where you feel like an issue that you were having to deal, that your mathematical background helped you contribute in a particular way to one of the issues that confronted you while you were there?
Well, one particular experience, what I recall was so at that time, it was the 10-year anniversary of the DHS, the Department of Homeland Security. And we were looking closely at just really how far the department had come, in the sense that DHS grew out of, it was well defined to a certain extent, but they had a lot of duties that were combined from other agencies and other government entities. And so looking at their scientific portfolio, their science technology portfolio, was what we were charged to do in creating a hearing around the topic. And so having the mathematical foundation made me more comfortable, which was not necessarily the experience for others, to be able to go in and learn and take a deep dive into current technologies that were being developed and explored by the department, and be able to synthesize that and make it useful to the member as we were helping to inform him as he was leading the hearing. And so being able to see that big picture and appreciate the technology, the technical nuance rather, of the science technology they were developing, which is not always an easy thing to do, right? Because you can see a tool and how do you really make it useful to a non-technical audience, was one of the greater things I had to do for that. But I also had the opportunity to serve on the hearing prep around a preparedness discussion surrounding the Boston Marathon bombings, for example. And while none of that really involved any mathematics for that matter, being analytical, being able to ask the right questions, being able to get to the heart of some of the discussion was useful, where perhaps being focused only on the emotional part of it was a tragedy, but having to be able to be objective and find that balance there, I found having a mathematics background allowed me to do that much more easily.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I know you know this already, but when you are looking at complex events or things like that, there are a lot of questions that cross the boundary into operations research, which is again mathematics. How do you deploy those resources most effectively to meet your goals?
And yeah, one of the things that we found in that area in particular, that region of the country, is that they were very well prepared. This was an event that they had, had for, it's been over 100 years they've had the marathon. And so because they were prepared, the response was, really effective, and there was not more loss of life and damage.
Yeah. All right. Well, Dr. Cotwright-Williams, again, we really appreciate you being with us tonight. I want to thank the audience for joining us. And I do encourage you to look more at the public policy stuff. We do work with Karen Sachs's office at AMS, and we work through a number of collaborative groups in the DC area to advocate for funding for mathematics and mathematics education and so forth. So if you're interested in those sorts of things, check out the AMS page, or get in touch with your MAA rep and ask to get on the MAA science policy.
Absolutely. Yes.
So again, thanks to everybody for joining us tonight. We hope you have a great evening.
Thank you.